Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the South Hills, also known as Sunnyhill. We're delighted that you could join us for this service. Our mission here is to create a more just and compassionate community within and beyond our walls. My name is Rebecca Senaway, and this is Maddie Senaway, and today we will be your worship associates. If you're a newcomer or visitor to our congregation, please go to sunnyhill.org and click on the button that says New to Sunnyhill to receive more information about our congregation and our weekly email newsletter. If you're joining us online today, please say hello or good morning in the comments on Facebook or YouTube. We'd like to hear from you and extend a welcome to you as well.
Today we'll be hearing a reflection by my grandfather, Dolph John Armstrong. Dolph, or Grandolph, as many of you may also know him, first joined Sunnyhill in 1981, served as president of the board in 1983, and, over the years, has participated in many facets of Sunnyhill. Recently, on the Oversight Committee for the new building addition, and currently as a member of the facilities team, as the guy you can call to help with anything. He is awesomely handy, and if he doesn't know how to fix it or build it, he'll figure it out and do it beautifully. He's a lifelong learner, a volunteer, a mentor, and a lover of reading, theater, arts, and the outdoors. He is strong and open-minded, and he challenges himself daily to stay active and engaged. He's present and involved in our lives and in our community, and in my completely unbiased opinion, we are all better for knowing him.
Well done. The following opening words were written by John Steinbeck. Where does discontent start? You are warm enough, but you shiver. You are fed, yet hunger gnaws you. You have been loved, but your yearning wanders in new fields. And to prod all these, there's time, the bastard time. The end of life is now not so terribly far away. You can see it in the way you see the finish line when you come into the stretch. And your mind says, have I worked enough? Have I eaten enough? Have I loved enough? All these, of course, are the foundation of man's greatest curse, and perhaps his greatest glory. What has my life meant so far, and what can it mean in the time left to me? Please join me in saying the words for lighting our chalice. In a world filled with the darkness of ignorance, let us bring the light of reason. In a world filled with the darkness of despair, let us share the light of hope. In a world filled with the darkness of hate, let us shine the light of love.
Good morning. Please rise and by your spirit to join in our opening hymn, Here We Have Gathered.
Circle of
please be seated.
The Other Side by Jacqueline Woodson. That summer, the fence that stretched through our town seemed bigger. We lived in a yellow house on one side of it. White people lived on the other. And Mama said, "Don't climb over that fence when you play." She said it wasn't safe. That summer, there was a girl who wore a pink sweater. Each morning, she climbed up on the fence and stared over at our side. Sometimes I stared back. She never sat on that fence with anybody. That girl didn't. Once, when we were jumping rope, she asked if she could play, and my friend Sandra said no, without even asking the rest of us. I don't know what I would have said. Maybe yes, maybe no. That summer, everyone and everything on the other side of that fence seemed far away. When I asked my mama why, she said, "Because that's the way things have always been." Sometimes, when me and Mama went into town, I saw that girl with her mama. She looked sad sometimes, that girl did. "Don't stare," my mama said. "It's not polite." It rained a lot that summer. On rainy days, that girl sat on the fence in a raincoat. She let herself get all wet and acted like she didn't even care. Sometimes I saw her dancing around in puddles, splashing and laughing. Mama wouldn't let me go out in the rain. "That's why I bought you rainy day toys," my mama said. "You stay inside here, where it's warm and safe and dry." But every time it rained, I looked for that girl, and I always found her, somewhere near the fence. Someplace in the middle of summer, the rain stopped. When I walked outside, the grass was damp and the sun was already high up in the sky, and I stood there with my hands up in the air. I felt brave that day. I felt free. I got close to the fence, and that girl asked me my name. "Clover," I said. "My name's Annie," she said. "Annie Paul. I live over yonder," she said. "By where you see the laundry? That's my blouse hanging on the line." She smiled then. She had a pretty smile. And then I smiled, and we stood there looking at each other, smiling. "It's nice up on this fence," Annie said. "You can see all over." I ran my hand along the fence. I reached up and touched the top of it. "A fence like this was made for sitting on," Annie said. She looked at me sideways. "My mama says I shouldn't go on the other side of the fence," I said. "My mama says the same thing, but she never said nothing about sitting on it." Neither did mine," I said. That summer, me and Annie sat together on that fence, and when Sandra and them looked at me funny, I just made believe I didn't care. Some mornings, my mama watched us. I waited for her to tell me to get down from that fence before I break my neck or something, but she never did. "I see you made a new friend," she said one morning, and I nodded, and Mama smiled. That summer, me and Annie sat on that fence and watched the whole wide world around us. One day, Sandra and them were jumping rope near the fence, and we asked if we could play. "I don't care," Sandra said, and when we jumped, Sandra and we were partners the way we used to be. When we were too tired to jump anymore, we sat up on that fence, all of us in a long line. "Someday, somebody's going to come along and knock this old fence down," Annie said, and I nodded. "Yeah," I said, "someday."
And with that, we'll sing the out to Ari. As you go, may joy surround you. As you go, go in peace. Know our love is with you always. As you go, as you go, as you go, may joy surround you. As you go, go in peace. Know our love is with you always. As you go, as you go. I'm really excited to introduce my friend Julia Kaufman. We go way back. And I'm super grateful to John for doing this service again and picking these songs again and letting us sing them together again.
It's such a pleasure to be here.
Is that me who's floating away, lifted up to the clouds by a kiss? Never felt nothing like this.
Is that me? I don't recognize. Love's the one thing I knew all about. I had it all figured out.
But what about trust?
What about trust?
What about tenderness?
Tenderness.
What about tears when I'm happy? What about wings when I fall? I want you to be a story for me that I can believe in forever. So what about love? Will you be my light in the storm? Will I see a new world in your eyes? With you my whole spirit rise. And what about hope?
What about hope?
What about joy?
What about joy?
What about tears when I'm happy? What about wings when I fall? I want you to be a story for me that I can believe in forever. And what about love? What about love? You and me, you and me. Say to me, what about love?
What about
What about love?
Thanks. Good morning. My name is Liz Baldoni, and this is Tyson Sears. Together, we will be serving as the new co-chairs for the caring team. The caring team is separate from the pastoral care team, with which you may already be familiar.
So today our purpose was to introduce ourselves, but also see if you'd like to join the caring team. So Liz and I both joined Around a year ago, and I've had conversations with a lot of people who have said, I want to get involved with Sunnyhill in some meaningful way, but there's only so many hours in the day, hours are erratic. With the caring team, you can sign up to receive emails when a member here needs a ride, they need a meal, a friendly favor. So if I'm going on vacation and I need someone to take out my garbage, something like that, as well as joining us whenever there's any memorial service here. You take it.
Sure. And you can find us at the table out front at the end of the service. And just to be clear, providing us with your email doesn't obligate you to anything. You just will receive the email and you can accept or pass as fits your schedule and suits your talents. We hope to see you out there. Thank you. Still here. We're going to do joys and sorrows now. Each week at this time in the service, we share joys and sorrows submitted by members of the congregation. We share things that we're celebrating as well as things that we're mourning, so they do not need to be held alone. Joys and sorrows may be submitted online from our website. After each joy or sorrow that I read, please respond by saying, "We hold you in our hearts." We had 2 joys submitted this week. Charlie and Pam Cook share, "We were again reminded this week of the superb asset St. Clair Hospital is to our community, including the hospital medical staff and vascular surgeon Dr. Thomas Simone and his staff. Sometimes we need to recognize the best in our lives." To Charlie and Pam, we hold you in our hearts. The second joy that was submitted is from Joni Major on behalf of her son with autism. She shares that he advocated for himself at work and says, "Way to go, Ed." To Joni and Ed, we hold you in our hearts. Let us bear in mind all these joys and sorrows, as well as those that are held too closely to be shared. Thank you.
Please join me in the spirit of meditation or prayer. Let us pause to consider how we are cared for and how we care for others. Life starts small and grows, nourished by the earth, the sun, water, and air, nurtured by so many caring hands and hearts, mothers and grandmothers, aunts and cousins, fathers, strangers, friends, and untold others. The gift of life is freely given, but sustaining life requires work, requires sweat and tears, requires sacrifice and patience and perseverance, none of which comes easy, none of which is a given. Circles of caring, crying, laughing are traced by fingers, seen and unseen, forming a web that holds all, a silken net that catches the fallen and the falling, that works to mend holes, that sometimes fails, that frequently tires, that always and forever tries. Let us pause for a moment of silence as we consider those who have nurtured us and those whom we have nurtured. May the great web of all life hold us and others. May the gentle hand of caring and compassion touch all, and may we reach out to give and receive and be love again and again and again. Amen.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice.
Hey, good morning. Before I begin, I'd just like to take a moment to thank Reverend Jim for giving me the opportunity to update and reprise the sermon I delivered 3 years ago. It's the product of his sermon writing class, and I'm flattered that he thought it worth repeating. I'd also like to thank Jen for organizing and managing all the elements that make the service whole and complete. Mary Pratt and Julia Kaufman for lending their beautiful voices and giving soul to this service. I promise you that it's worth sitting through the sermon to hear them sing for good. My daughter Rebecca for carrying all the freight of the service and her excellent insights and editing of my reflection, and my granddaughter Maddie for her wonderful storytelling and meditation. Finally, this reflection is about people and events that changed my life. Significant in its absence is any mention of my wife Judy, who changed my life more than anyone or anything has since the day she asked me to paint her apartment. If it were not for her, I would not be here now. She taught me that I could embrace liberal ideals without growing horns, and the importance of humor. How could I not love someone whose litmus test for marriage was laughing out loud at Monty Python? For almost 50 years, Judy has been my lodestar. I am the luckiest of men. Because I knew you. I first met Jack Armstrong when I was 5 years old. He brought me a bicycle that he had fixed up and painted bright red, his favorite color. A few months later, Jack married my mother, and a year after that, he adopted my older sister, my younger brother, and me. Over time, I would develop an affection for Jack, but when I was young, we had a rocky relationship. Dad was a spare the rod and spoil the child disciplinarian, and I was defiant, a bad combination. When he would punish me, I would scream that he wasn't my father and had no right. Still, I learned a lot from him. Most of what I am good at, he taught me, especially how to be self-sufficient, to be good with my hands, to enjoy Shakespeare, and remarkably, gender equality. But I was also well-schooled in political, religious, ethnic, racist, and anti-Semitic slurs, which I largely picked up from Jack's rants. When I was Maddie's age, I could have written a lexicon of bigotry. The mere mention of Martin Luther King would set him off, and he blamed the Jews for most of the ills of the world. He passionately hated Franklin Roosevelt and referred to him as Rosenfeld, a double insult. He ranted against Roman Catholics almost as much as Jews, which was particularly hurtful since my grandma Viviano, whom I loved almost as much as my mother, was a devout Catholic. Sometimes Dad would slip and make a remark about Italians, which made me wonder what he really thought about his 3 adopted half-Sicilian children. In the song from the 1949 musical South Pacific that Carol played at the beginning of the service, Rodgers and Hammerstein tell us, "You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught." And in the 2014 musical Into the Woods, Stephen Sondheim further warns, "Careful the things you say, children will listen. Careful the things you do, children will see and learn. I heard, I saw, I learned." It must seem uncharitable to out a man to whom I owe so much as a bigot. To be fair, it was only one aspect of a complex person, and I have tried to understand where his bigotry came from. When Dad was growing up, racism and anti-Semitism were widespread. Racism was codified under Jim Crow laws, and segregation was practiced as the doctrine of separate but equal, which even a child could see was a charade. Jewish exclusion laws made anti-Semitism legal, and powerful men like Joseph Kennedy, Charles Lindbergh, and especially Henry Ford were openly anti-Semitic. In his book, One Summer, 1927, Bill Bryson writes that Henry Ford bought a dying weekly newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, and used it to run regular, strident attacks on the world's Jews, accusing them, among other things, of manipulating stock markets and working for the overthrow of Christianity. The paper was also pro-Hitler. My father would have been 17 in 1927, and it's easy to imagine him being influenced by such powerful men. Although my bigotry was picked up the way one gets lung cancer from passive cigarette smoke, my view of the world was tainted. There were two incidents, however, that were so over the top, they made me begin to question my father's racist, anti-Semitic worldview. The first occurred 2 days before we moved to Virginia. It was an angry, slur-filled lecture about the character of Jews, which Jack gave me after a deal to sell my car to a Jewish high school friend, Danny Krell, fell through. I didn't know Danny's father, but I liked Danny. He was always doing cool things and was a genuinely nice guy. So what Dad said just didn't make sense. The second occurred after we moved to Virginia. I attended an all-white high school in the Shenandoah Valley, where Dixie was played at every assembly and we were expected to stand. There I met Ernest Carlisle Lynch, who taught drafting. One day during class, he ran a movie called One Hoe for Colabo. The film was about the enormous amount of work it took for an African-American tribe to forge a single hoe for farming. The aptly named Mr. Lynch used as the basis of a lecture on the supposed equality of whites and blacks. Insert the N-word here. Blacks were mentally inferior and fit only for servitude. Of course, no one in the class of 16-year-old boys would think to question Mr. Lynch and risk being accused of being an N-lover. I found the lecture revolting, and I didn't quite understand why I did. Perhaps it was due to the other influences in my life. As a teenager, I read and reread Twain's Huckleberry Finn, and I devoured the humanist works of John Steinbeck, not knowing, of course, that he was a humanist or what a humanist was. And my mother quietly provided counterpoint to Dad's prejudices and gave me permission to question them. Don't prejudge people, she would say. Despite Mom's advice, when I left for college, I was programmed to define people by their race, religion, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. Steinbeck writes, when two people meet, each one is changed by the other. I don't know if I've changed anyone, but over my lifetime, I've met people who have changed me. Some I have known well, and some only in passing. In 1967, I was drafted and sent to Vietnam, where for the first time in my life, I worked, ate, and slept side by side with African Americans. In my unit, race, religion, ethnicity didn't matter. You wanted the best men beside you when you were clearing landmines and in your foxhole at night. You were trusting them with your life. In our downtime, we talk about home, and I found that we were very much alike. Our differences stemmed from our lives before the war and our expectations when we went home. I came from privilege, and I had big dreams. Most of the Americans in my platoon were draftees who came from tough environments. They were poorly educated and would be going home to limited opportunities and prejudice. They might survive Vietnam, but would they survive going home? In February 1968, my squad was sent to Bang Son to fortify an important bridge over the Lê Giang River that the Viet Cong wanted desperately to destroy. One morning, I was building a gun platform on top of the bridge when a familiar figure began climbing the ladder to my position. I had not seen First Sergeant Gustave Couchon for several weeks. I had been his Jeep driver on a long, unescorted trip through hostile country, and he held a unique position in my life. He was the first black man with whom I'd ever had a long, frank conversation. Well, the term conversation may be misleading. I mostly listened. I was completely focused on getting us to LZ Montezuma without hitting a landmine or being ambushed. I was surprised to see Sergeant Couchon on the bridge. I had heard that he was beaucoup dinky-dao, as the Vietnamese would say, and had been sent to the rear to be discharged for being mentally unfit. Nearing the end of his career and out of shape, he was still a large, impressive man, and I was more than a little nervous. The situation was so surreal that even I have a hard time believing it happened. It was theater of the absurd on a stage 18 feet in the air. To my relief, he just wanted to talk. So again, I listened as he told me more about what it was like to be a black man in a white man's army. The last thing he said to me was, "Someday you will be important, and people," meaning black people, "have to be treated better." If Martin Luther King had been on top of that bridge, he would have said, "There comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must take it because his conscience tells him it is right." My conscience told me that Sergeant Couchon was right. The disenfranchisement of young black men is a national tragedy. I don't know what he expected me to do, but too busy with my own life, career, and family, I did nothing, though I never forgot his message. Black lives do matter. Along the road between the Bang Son Bridge and the hillside to the south were several little bamboo shops. One was run by a young girl named Lane who sold Coca-Cola. Several little girls hung out around the shops, but none were like Lane, and I don't know why. She seemed to be wise beyond her years and had a Mona Lisa smile. When she looked at you, it was as if she was peering into your soul. So even though we were told it wasn't safe to drink, I bought Coke from Lane almost every day. Coke reminded me of home, and buying it helped her and her family. A few days after Sergeant Couchon came and went, I was standing on that same platform when we began taking enemy fire from the hillside above the shops. Convinced I was a prime target, I hurried down the ladder. Because I didn't have my rifle and ammunition, a mistake I never made again, I hopped into a foxhole with a machine gunner. The firefight was fierce but short. AK-47s are no match for a tank with quad 40-millimeter cannons. In all the madness, I was truly surprised to find myself thinking about Lane and worrying that she and the others could have been hurt in the intense crossfire. So when the firefight was over, I retrieved my weapon and headed to her shop. I was relieved to see her at work and smiling. I bought a Coke. A few days later, I left Bang Son on a temporary assignment to clear landmines for a mechanized infantry company. When I said goodbye to Lane, she gave me a picture of herself, which she had signed on the back. Lane, sell coca, Bang Son. I was moved. The picture must have been a precious item. Why would she give it to me? Why would she want me to remember her? Despite my affection for Lane, our attitude toward the Vietnamese people was undeniably racist. We called them gooks and dinks. We dehumanized them because they were the enemy and it makes them easier to kill. It was a survival tactic. It happens in all wars. And to borrow a quote from Full Metal Jacket, I wanted to be the first kid on my block to get a confirmed kill. I wish I could tell you that receiving that picture from Lane immediately changed me. It did not. The epiphany occurred a few years later when I was alone in a movie theater in Manhattan. I was watching a film called Little Big Man, starring Dustin Hoffman, which included a scene where cavalry soldiers attacked a Native American village filled with women and children, an intentional reference to Vietnam. It was so painful to watch that it made me sick. On the subway home, all I could think about was an incident that happened a few days after I had safely tucked Lane's photo into my rucksack. I was with a platoon of armored personnel carriers that had formed up along the perimeter of a small village. Just as we arrived, a young man popped out of a hut and started running for his life across the rice paddies. Because he ran, he was the enemy, and he died in a hail of bullets from machine guns and M16s. Then we tore apart the village looking for weapons and spider holes. I went back to my apartment and threw out most of my Vietnam mementos, including a camo jacket with a patch that said Viet Cong Hunting Club. But I kept Lane's picture. I had carried in my rucksack for months in the jungle, and I still have it today. When I look at it, sometimes I smile. Sometimes I see more than Lane. Sometimes I see the entire war in her face. I see the person I had been, and I feel ashamed. In July 1968, I was assigned to an infantry company that would spearhead an assault in the Central Highlands. I was a demolition specialist, and it would be my job to blow up some trees in the middle of the landing zone that posed a danger to the helicopters. I was in the second or third chopper with Captain Robert R. Vaughn, the only black company commander I have ever met. When we landed, we started taking small arms fire from the perimeter. I forgot about my job and dove for cover. When I looked up, I saw Captain Vaughn standing in the middle of the LZ, calmly directing the action as if he were bulletproof. He yelled at me to get the F up and blow the effing trees. I felt like a giant neon arrow was pointing down at me with the words, "Shoot here." But following his lead, I got the F up and I blew the effing trees. The enemy fled, the other two companies landed safely, and we moved out into the jungle. During my short time with C Company, I shared a poncho tent with Captain Vaughn, and I got to know him better. I was impressed by his leadership, his courage, his humility, his sense of humor, and his concern for his men. They called him Black Superman because he regularly exposed himself to enemy fire and survived. Captain Vaughn was among the best people I have ever known, but I couldn't understand why a black man would risk his life for a company of mostly white troops. What motivated him to do what he did, knowing the racial prejudices he would face back home? I'll never know for sure, but here's my best guess. Captain Vaughn was an idealist. He had a plan to change the world, starting with the people around him. He certainly changed me. In 1971, I moved to New York City to become an actor. I was taken in by two old college roommates, Sam and Con. We had become friends as drama students in Richmond. Both were working in the theater. Sam was playing the Indian in the long-running off-Broadway musical, The Fantastics. Con had just finished a national tour of Fiddler on the Roof and was writing a musical, the Red Bluegrass Western Flyer Show, which was later produced by the Goodspeed Opera House. Shortly before I arrived, Con told Sam that he was going to tell me that he was gay and that I would just have to live with it. Sam laughed and said, "Con, he's known for years." Sam couldn't wait to tell me what Con said, and he blurted it out moments after I walked through the door. We all laughed. But I was a little hurt that Con didn't trust me. We had been friends for nearly 10 years. We had worked, played, and lived together. He was the one who taught me that it was who you were that mattered, not who you loved. Con had grown up in dirt-poor coal country in southwestern Virginia. It must have been tough being gay, and Con had become a master at playing straight. Now he wanted to make it perfectly clear that he wasn't hiding anymore. He was out, and his boyfriend would be coming to the apartment. I was okay with that, but Con had terrible taste in men. In the early 1980s, Con was diagnosed with AIDS. When I learned that he was sick, Judy and I had already moved to Pittsburgh. So on a business trip to New York, I met Con for lunch. When we parted, I wanted to hug him, but I was afraid. In those days, AIDS was a death sentence, and no one was absolutely sure how it was transmitted. After what seemed like forever, I stepped in and gave him a long hug. Then I turned and walked away. I couldn't look back. Billy Con Fleming died a few months later, and I was thankful I had shown him that I loved him. When I first delivered this talk 3 years ago, I may have left the impression that my journey toward anti-racism was an easy path. It was not. I don't like to tell this story, but to leave it out would be disingenuous. In 1974, I was alone in our apartment one evening when there was a knock on the door. Thinking it was Judy returning from acting class, I opened the door without looking through the peephole. In the hallway was a large black man with a gun. He stuck his foot in the door and forced his way into the apartment. In the struggle that followed, he knocked me to the floor, kneeled on my back so I could barely breathe, and ripped my new wedding band from my finger. When I asked him to please not take my ring, he jammed the muzzle of his gun so hard against my temple that I thought my skull would crack. Then he said, "You're lucky I don't effing kill you." Even as I feared for my life, I was filled with racist thoughts. I could not separate his race from his brutality. That was just the beginning of a truly terrifying experience. Judy and I survived relatively unscathed, but my altruism did not. When I looked at mug shots and could not find him, I was tempted to pick out a random black man just to get even. A few months later, we moved out of the city, and for a long time after, if I saw an African American on the sidewalk, I would cross the street. Time heals. Good memories pushed out the bad. But I give most of the credit for my recovery to Harry and Sandy English, an interracial couple we met at our UU church in New Jersey. Harry was a former member of the Tuskegee Airmen. He had been a New York City cop, and he had seen it all. Yet Harry was one of the kindest, most thoughtful men I have ever met, despite the racism he faced all of his life. He and Sandy, who have both since died, became two of our closest and dearest friends, and would drive to Pittsburgh to spend weekends with us playing Trivial Pursuit and eating the world's best crumb cake from Hackensack, New Jersey. Rebecca once commented that she saw Sandy and Harry so often at our church, at Star Island, and at our home that she thought interracial marriages were normal. Nina and Joe Mikowski came into our lives in 1979 when Judy and I bought a small home next door to them in Bergenfield, New Jersey. We were painting the house one hot afternoon when Joe knocked on the door and invited us to join them for a cold beer. That cold beer led to a warm friendship, and later to an invitation to join them for a Passover Seder. One day over another cold beer, as our friendship and the trust between us grew, Joe told us the harrowing story of how as a young man he had survived the Holocaust. He escaped from a labor camp in Poland and fled into Russia, where he was drafted into the army. Nina had been smuggled out of the Warsaw Ghetto as a teenager. Because she was a blue-eyed blonde who spoke perfect Polish in addition to Yiddish, she was able to pass as a Christian. She hid in plain sight as a clerk in a hotel visited daily by Nazi officers who would flirt with her. After the war, Joe and Nina moved to Israel, where Joe fought in the War of Independence. Because work was scarce, they applied for visas and moved to the United States. Even after the horrors they lived through and the family members they had lost, Joe and Nina were open and loving. They had earned the right to distrust, to prejudice, to hate, and they had rejected it. In Nina's eulogy, her son Michael wrote, "Despite all the hardships she endured, Nina never became prejudiced. She would occasionally speak to her grandchildren's Hebrew school about the Holocaust. She always ended with the message that there are good people in all races and that a Polish Christian woman helped save her life." When others would say they hate the Germans, Nina would say, "In this house we only talk of love." Joe and Nina practiced love. They taught their children love, and because of our love for them, Judy and I named our son after their son, Michael. Try to understand men, Steinbeck writes. If you understand each other, you will be kind to each other. Knowing a man well never leads to hate and almost always leads to love. I hope and pray that we will teach our children love and kindness, tear down the fences that separate us, and allow people into our lives who will change us for the better. May it be so. Amen.
Please rise again and body your spirit to sing Love Will Guide Us.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way. On the road from green to clear, love will guide us through the ride. If you cannot see the dangers, if you cannot speak before
It's now time for our morning offering. We don't have the designated offering this morning, so our collection will benefit Sunnyhill and will help defray our operating expenses. If you'd like to make a gift via our online giving system, you can do so by going to sunnyhill.org and click on the button that says Online Giving, and then follow the instructions. Or you can give by text at 412-324-3130. Text the amount of your gift and the word pledge if you want your payment to apply to your 2022 Sunnyhill pledge. Otherwise, text gifts will go toward our general operating fund. You can also mail a check if you prefer, and you can find our mailing address on our website, sunnyhill.org. For those of you who are here with us in person, we'll be passing around our offering baskets in just a moment. Thank you all for your generosity, and please enjoy.
I've heard it said that people come into our lives for a reason, bringing something we must learn, and we are led to those who help us most to grow if we let them, and we help them in return. Well, I don't know if I believe that's true, but I know who I am today because I knew you. Like a comet pulled from orbit as it passes the sun, like a stream that meets a boulder halfway through the wood. Who can say if I've been changed for the better? But because I knew you, I have been changed for good. It well may be that we will never meet again in this lifetime. So let me say before we part, so much of me is made from what I learned from you. You'll be with me like a handprint on my heart. And now whatever way our stories end, I know you have rewritten mine by being my friend. Like a ship blown from its mooring by a wind of the sea, like a seed dropped by a skybird in a distant wood. Who can say if I've been changed for the better? But because I knew you, because I knew you, I have been changed for good. And just to clear the air, I ask forgiveness for the things I've done you blame me for. But then I guess there's blame to share, and none of it seems to matter anymore. Like a comet, like a ship blown from its mooring by a wind off the sea, like a stream that meets like a seed dropped by a bird in the wood. Who can say if I've been changed for the better? I do believe I have been changed for the better.
And because I knew you,
Because I knew you. Because I knew you. I have been changed for good.
Thank you. Couple announcements before we extinguish the chalice. Please don't forget to visit the Caring Committee. They'll share more about what they do and hope to get you on that email list. And the social justice team will have a table out there as well, and they're looking for folks who are interested in reproductive justice and the UU the Vote effort. So please visit both tables while we're having coffee after the service is over. So please join me in extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
These closing words are from East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I believe that there is one story in the world, and only one. Humans are caught in their lives, in their thoughts, in their hungers and ambitions, in their avarice and cruelty, and in their kindness and generosity too, in a net of good and evil. There is no other story. A man, after he has brushed off the dust and chips of his life, will have left only the hard, clean questions. Was it good or was it evil? Have I done well or ill? Go in peace and love.